You're listening to the Dead Padawans Society, a science fiction and fantasy podcast celebrating the ideas, mythologies, and truths in iconic works of sci-fi. I'm your host, Brett Inman, joined by my friend...
Nick Dennis.
Hey, man.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing well. Hello, listeners.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for joining us. This is...
Episode 6, and today's podcast, we are going to be talking about the film Moon. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too. But before we get to that, Brett, we're going to go through our latest obsessions. What do you got?
Well, this just recently ended, but the website Homestar Runner ran an incredibly successful Kickstarter for a board game called Trogdor, which those of you who are about our age in the audience will no doubt know. Trogdor was the creation of Strong Bad on the website Homestar Runner back in the early days of the internet. I think it was like 03, maybe, something like that.
See, we're millennials, but
yeah.
I feel even young millennials don't know this.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Stuff. I feel like those who are in their low 20s don't know like Homestar Runner like we do. People in their late 20s, 30s really remember Homestar Runner because that was before YouTube and everything, where you would go and watch the videos on there. That website was amazing.
Yeah, I guess
it still is.
Way after the fact, they created this board game, Trogdor, and I decided to back it. It ended up, it came close to if not exceeded $1.5 million
which is
in backers,
nuts.
which is insane for a Kickstarter. Yeah,
for Kickstarter and a board game.
And a board game. I guess a lot of it was just recognition of that in-joke. So as a backer, I was super excited, and then I checked the email that was like, congratulations, you're a backer. And it said the delivery date was June of 2019. And I was like, no.
As a millennial, you were like, nah, I'm not going to wait that long.
No. So, fortunately, within about a week, they released the print and play. And so I was able to print it and have played it a few times. You actually were the first person I played with.
Yeah. So have you played it more since we played?
I'm a loser. I've played it by myself a few times. So
I will say it is fun. We did not beat the game. It's cooperative, and the peasants won out. Our Trogdor did not burninate the entire countryside.
Yeah, because the song for Trogdor's theme song is the rules of the game. You burninate the peasants, burninate the countryside, and burninate the thatched roof cottages.
Listeners, if you have not seen this video, go to YouTube, go to homestarrunner.com, and just search for Trogdor.
Yeah.
It's a great
cartoon. You're rewarding yourself. Yeah, and look up. The great thing
even
is
if you know nothing about those characters
and
the series of Homestar, it's still a good and it's a funny video.
There's this whole can of worms that you can open by starting down that road, because then like there were a couple of games about Trogdor that were released, and there were some other videos, and there were just this entire network of things, and then you start watching other Homestar Runner videos, and so basically that has been my life since I started interacting with it again through the Kickstarter, and I've enjoyed it. It's interesting. I definitely am looking forward to playing it with some other friends to kind of get their take on the game. I feel like it's a little simple compared to some of the games that my friends enjoy playing, or tabletop and board games.
Yeah, as far as like role-playing and strategy games, it's very simple. It's not too hard to learn. And if you just send somebody, if they haven't seen Trogdor, just send them the video beforehand and say, here's the rules. Watch this video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that. Honestly, one of the things I'm kind of interested in, I really love modding board games for myself. So trying out other things. I'm like, I don't really like this about the game, so let's try something different. And I feel like with Trogdor, they're actually using all the same components. There could be, so it's currently a cooperative game where everybody plays as Trogdor and you're burninating the countryside, which is great, fun. And the board is kind of automated, so it's sort of like stupid AI where it will just do a thing and without any thought or reason, and sometimes it hurts you and sometimes it doesn't. I think the game could be really interesting if instead you played it more like a... there's a game that I've played before called Fury of Dracula, where one person plays as Dracula, the other players are playing as like investigators, and they're trying to catch Dracula as he's fleeing around
awesome.
Europe. Yeah, yeah. And so I feel like this game would be great if it was given that kind of treatment, where you have one player who is Trogdor trying to burnate the countryside, and then everybody else is playing the peasants trying to stop.
And the knights, all that. That would be fun, and it would add extra strategy into it of learning what somebody will do and try to base your moves off of them. That would be better.
Yeah, so I love that kind of speculation. It's awful. I get a board game and I'm like, how can I play this differently than the way they intended me to play it?
And will my rules work out, or will I go down this road and it just fall apart?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So what have you been into?
I had just finished up this comic run. I've got the volumes of Irredeemable. Have you ever heard of that comic? Daniel Spear gave it to me, and it's been out of, I think it finished up in, I don't know, 2006 or 7, something like that. But it's Mark Waid, who has written a ton for DC. He did Kingdom Come, and he's done Green Lantern, JLA, like a bunch of different comic runs, Daredevil. But he went off and did, outside of DC, he did this comic for Boom, and it's called Irredeemable, and it's basically like the Justice League. It's in a different universe, but there's characters that, if you think about them, can fit, the different roles of the Justice League. And there's a Superman type character called the Plutonian, but he has, like, even his powers dwarf Superman's powers. He's ridiculously powerful, and he's also a Boy Scout.
Okay, that sounds like it'd be hard to write for me, because that's one of the biggest complaints about Superman, is that he's OP and there's nothing that can face him.
That's what makes this so great, is because he is like the ray of light, the Boy Scout, and then one day he snaps and he turns on the world. And he goes berserk, and he starts destroying Earth, killing people, like all of this stuff. It's great because the comic is called Irredeemable. Within like the first 6 or 7 panels, you immediately know that this character is irredeemable. It's that fast. They introduce him, and he does something. I won't spoil it, but you're like, holy smoke. Yeah, this guy is not redeemable at all. Anyway, but it had a long run. It's in double volume sets right now that you can buy on Amazon. So I just finished the last one up, and man, it had a great payoff at the end. I was not sure. It gets crazy out there. It gets cosmic, like other alien races and other planets, and all this stuff gets involved. It's like super cosmic. The fact that Mark Waid made this entire universe, it's as expansive. Like, I can't say that because DC and Marvel are crazy expensive.
Well, they've had so much time and things to build,
and writers to do so. But this universe is crazy huge, and so many elements and great writing to it. And I just finished it up. I wasn't sure, like, reading it along, it kind of went off on a tangent for a little while that I was wondering about. And I was like, where is it going, and how is this going to get wrapped up? And then it's like a train going down a mountain, like fast, crazy at the end, and then the end had a nice twist that I really liked.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great read.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Because like what you were saying of some people find it harder to get behind a Superman character because it's just hard to believe. Like this character, he was Superman for so long. He was doing his name is the Plutonian, and he did the Boy Scout thing for so long, and the weight of it just chipped away at him, and he just goes berserk and loses it, and it's incredible.
Yeah, which it's kind of interesting that he goes that direction with that character, because I feel like his Superman from Kingdom Come is a little darker, a little edgier.
Right. It's if you thought the edginess of Kingdom Come, like, that was taking it, this is just shooting past that line completely. It's very intricate, and just a really good story. I really enjoyed it. it makes me, after getting done with it, because it took me a while going through the volumes, and I was like, man, I kind of want to go ahead and read it, like reread the whole thing again so I can think back to those elements that were there at the beginning. But yeah, so reading that was just for fun and leisure. I've also continued watching The Twilight Zone. Been going through more episodes of that. Still enjoying it.
Cool.
Got some.
How far have you binged?
Not super far. I haven't really done a crazy binge. I'm about 8 or 9 episodes in. And yeah, they're solid. They're good. It's one that you can just put on and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
They're, again, simple premises, and some are better than others, but altogether it's a good series.
I love it. It was a simple time too, where you were able to tell a story and it doesn't have to tie into anything else. Like, it's amazing the way like Black Mirror will connect all of the different stories like they're happening in a universe, but there's a certain just kind of pleasant simplicity to stories that are completely unconnected, and you can drop in on one and get the whole story just from that one. Right.
They're connected because Rod Serling at the end says it can happen in the Twilight Zone. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only connection you get, because Rod says they're connected somehow.
Yeah.
But they don't try weaving a whole lot. They just are standalone pieces, which is nice and freeing sometimes, because you're not looking for the connection. You're not trying to make it all logically fit together.
Yeah.
Which can be cumbersome sometimes with the Marvels and the DCs and the different franchises that there are, trying to remember everything that happened. And this is a lot simpler. I've also been listening to The Time Machine on audiobook.
H.G. Wells.
Yeah. So I listened to, a couple weeks ago, From Earth to the Moon. And, Vern's all right. He's great, but Wells is much more my cup of tea, and I hadn't read Time Machine in probably 15, 20 years. I can't even remember how long it's been. And so I, got the audiobook from the library and was listening to it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah, this is I really enjoy it. It's another simple science fiction story.
Wow. So it's almost like this podcast is forcing you to look at media or reevaluate things.
That's what my wife, she's like, are you watching The Twilight Zone because of the podcast? Is this why you're watching? And I'm like, I guess kind of, like, because it made me remember these things, but it had been sitting in my queue for 3 years of, oh yeah, I want to go back and watch that sometime. And so it was a good excuse to. And the same thing with The Time Machine. It was like we were talking about it. It's like, yeah, I haven't listened to that in a long time. And I have an apology to make because a couple weeks ago when we talked about we were talking about Wells and Vern, and The Time Machine came up, and I had mentioned how the moon in that universe, the moon like broke apart, had exploded, and as I'm reading or listening to the audiobook, that doesn't happen. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I thinking?
That's just the movie, isn't it?
It's just the movie. and so I'm sure somebody was listening to that and was like, this guy does not know what he's talking about. That is the movie. He's never even read the book. And wow, yeah, there's a part in the book where he's like looking up at the moon, night falls and the Morlocks are, they come out at night, but he's just looking at the moon and enjoying it. And I was like, he's not saying anything about it being like broken into pieces. And then I was like, wait, what am I thinking of this from? And so I got on YouTube and typed in Time Machine Moon, and sure enough, it was the Guy Pearce movie.
Guy Pearce, yep.
From the 2000s. I can't remember what year it was, but I was like, oh, that's where I got it, because he jumps into, like the 20th or 21st century. I guess it was 21st century first before going way into the future. And he sees like the evacuation of a city and everything is falling apart and the moon is crashing down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it was a great visual too. Like that's it, so it's awesome in the movie.
I watched the video, I was like,
yeah,
that's pretty cool. I mean, I like it. It was a good addition to expanding that story, because it's a fairly small story. It's not a short story, but it's more of a novella than a full huge novel. So yeah, I was listening to that and I'm like, I completely got that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an A Time Machine story.
Yeah. I've actually been diving into some works as well as a result of the podcast, but not with the kind of like highbrow approach you've been taking.
Well,
so
I have time. That's the thing.
This week we've been looking at Moon, right?
Uh-huh.
So the thing I've been looking at is just Sam Rockwell videos on YouTube. Like that's the amount of research. That's the depth. You're like, I'm reevaluating these great works. I've got. You were showing me the other day that you've got like you were choosing between Frankenstein and The Time Machine. Like, what work am I going to look at next? And you're doing like this deep reading, and I'm like, have you seen Sam Rockwell dance with Jimmy Fallon? It's the best.
That is a good use of your time, I will say. And
I like to think so. My wife disagrees, but
well, it's also cheating a bit because I do design work and I can listen to something which is very right-brained and still work, which is very left-brained, and it doesn't affect one or the other. I can do both, and so I don't think you can do that in your job. Like, I don't think you could probably listen to a like a book, maybe a podcast or something like that.
It depends on what part of the process I'm working on. But,
yeah, but I can knock out a book pretty easy in a week. So
show off.
Yeah, but watching Sam Rockwell on YouTube is also a great use of time.
The guy is incredible. I mean, we're going to talk about that as we get into the episode, I'm sure. But just the things that he does outside of that. I mean, he was in the 80s live-action Ninja Turtles movie.
Yeah, you told me that. I still haven't looked into that.
Yep,
How
he's
crazy.
a member of the Foot Clan. He's
a Foot
young.
Clan member.
There's that. There again, man is a dancing machine. That which he does a little bit in Moon, but again, you need to look up his like dance off with Fallon.
I looked at one video where he comes out and they dance together. I didn't see the dance off, but and he hits the splits, and I'm like, dude's awesome. He's one of those actors that like runs off charisma. That
totally.
I don't see how anyone dislikes him. Kind of like The Rock. Like, how do you hate The Rock? You can't hate Sam Rockwell. I feel he was in. I just watched
Rockwell, The Rock. Is there a?
That's it.
Is there a key to being famous in Hollywood that involves?
That's what it is. If you have rock in your name, you're golden.
You're rock solid.
There you go. What was it? First movie I can remember seeing him in was Matchstick Men. Have you ever seen that movie?
What's that one about?
It's two con artists, and one of them is Nick Cage. And this is before like internet Nick Cage age, but it's a solid movie of two con men working together, and Sam Rockwell is one of them.
Ooh.
This is earlier.
I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, it's good. It's really good. Nick Cage is like this neurotic OCD guy who is the leader of the two con men, kind of like Danny Ocean kind of character. And Sam Rockwell is his number two, and it's got a good twist. I will say that in it. Is that a spoiler to say that there's a twist? Are you?
Yeah, you've just spoiled. I'm not even going to watch it anymore. Like, what's the point? Because I know there's a twist. So,
I guess so. Well, never watch it then.
Thanks for that.
It's a great movie, and you should never see it now.
I think the first time I was aware of Sam Rockwell was probably from Galaxy Quest.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I'm sure
I've
seen other things with him in it, but Galaxy Quest and his performance as Lieutenant Guy. What's my last name? You don't know? You don't know?
Yeah, he is just incredible in everything he does. I recently watched 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yeah.
He is a horrible racist, like a terrible, horrible racist in the movie. That's his character. And yet you still find likable things about him. Like he plays it funny. He's kind of dumb and ditzy. He's a cop, but he's always screwing up. And it's crazy that you can find him funny, even though he's a despicable character. You can find him funny, and by the end of it, there's some redeeming qualities to him as well. And I'm just like, I don't think you could have done that with anyone else but Sam Rockwell. Like, I think he nailed it. And he won for it. He won, I don't know if it was an Academy Award or a Golden Globe or something, but he won for it. And I was like, dude deserves it, because it was an amazing performance.
I feel like he's interesting because he's more than a character actor, but he isn't exactly like a leading man. Like, he's never quite been, even to Chris Pratt, who's funny, has kind of broken into that like leading man status. And I feel like Sam Rockwell isn't quite in that group of, you know, the Clooneys and Brad Pitt and those types of actors who continually get work as the leading person. It's like he takes these interesting, almost character actor positions, but he's a little bigger than your average character actor.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Downey before Downey hit Iron Man, which is funny because he's also in Iron Man 2.
Oh,
Rockwell shows up there. But I would think if he got something like that, he would skyrocket up. But maybe he doesn't want to do something like that.
That's possible.
That may be not what he's looking for.
Well, I mean, he evidently, as a result of listening through the supplemental stuff on the Moon DVD, he evidently likes doing sci-fi projects. I think he does have an interesting shape and direction that he wants to take his career. So,
well, I'm happy for him to be in more sci-fi because he's great in this. He's great in Galaxy Quest. I know he's in something else, but it's escaping me right now. Another big property. But why don't we just jump into Moon, since that's a good segue into this. We are talking about Moon from 2009. It is by director Duncan Jones, starring Sam Rockwell and Kevin Spacey. Now, we are not going to be doing a review of this movie, and so everything from here on out is going to be a spoiler, because we're not interested in just like a hot take of our broad thoughts on the movie. We want to get into the nitty-gritty of the sci-fi. And so this is us, if we're talking about it, this is us saying go see this movie.
Yeah, I feel like there are so many people on the internet that do reviews, and a lot of them do it really, really well. And that's great, and there's a place for that. I definitely think everything that we do on the show, even if it's bad, we're recommending you see it because we want to have a conversation around that work.
Absolutely. So if you haven't seen Moon, stop the podcast, go watch it, because it's great. We'll just go ahead and say it's a fantastic film, and come back, and then we'll dive right into talking about it. So from here on out, spoilers. All right. So Moon, just a general overview of what it is. It is astronaut Sam Bell is weeks away from the end of his 3-year stint on the Moon, where he, working alongside his AI coworker Gertie, sends back to Earth parcels of helium-3, a resource that has helped diminish the Earth's energy crisis. Sam begins to experience hallucinations and headaches before a fateful near-death accident that brings him to have an incredibly personal encounter. Sam Bell meets Sam Bell, a clone that has taken his place as the administrator of the lunar facility. Sam and Sam begin to question their reality, their mission, and the company they work for.
Ooh, that's a good recap, yeah.
I was trying to not just get into the nitty-gritty of it yet, because we're going to talk about that, but yeah. So Sam meets Sam. There's a clone.
Meets Sam.
Sam meets Sam meets Sam.
Here's Sam.
So before we get into the sci-fi discussion of it, just tell me something that you really like about this movie, and feel free, because you can spoil whatever you want.
Okay, can I be a total... Everybody in the audience is going to be like, he's such a hipster. I was part of the original theatrical audience for, not at the very first screening, mind you, but like whenever it theatrically... And it had a limited run, like primarily played at indie theaters.
Yeah, I never saw it in theaters.
I caught it in theaters. I got to see it at the Moxie Indie Theater in Springfield, Missouri. At that point, so we would have both been in college at 2009. I had heard about it. I'm sure that was when I was starting to get into filmmaking and that world. And so somewhere in that, I heard about the film. And I was like, this sounds awesome. And I had seen, I want to say there were some YouTube trailers. I think this movie may have had a little bit more of a viral or online marketing presence. So I had heard about it and had seen some images, and I'm like, this looks really great, and was able to talk some of my friends from back home into seeing it whenever I was in town. And so I got to see it theatrically in its first run in theaters, which was really, really, so that for me, like, I have a really close connection to it. But as a result of that, I almost immediately became a huge fan. And so whenever it came back around on Redbox, I was like, I got a new group of friends together and immediately had to show them this movie. I think one of the big things, and we've already talked about Sam Rockwell, and we're going to keep talking about Sam Rockwell because that's all you can talk about in this movie.
He is the actor.
He is the movie. I love a lot of the filmmaking that's on display, though, too. And so Duncan Jones, the team that worked on this, I love the sets. I love the practical effects that they used in a lot of places, and the blend of practical effects with digital effects. Like, there are some interesting things if you watch the DVD that they, in the commentary, will call out and say, oh, that gas that's spewing out of that hose, that's actually not practical. That was a digital effect that was added later. And so I find that really, really cool that they used actual models for a lot of the stuff on the lunar surface was cool.
Yeah, that rover, that's a real like RC, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's one scene where they had one that they couldn't operate or didn't have the operators for it when both of them are moving. And so the production crew was like, put a string on it and just pull it. Just
pull that sucker.
So I love that kind of stuff. And probably the most impressive visual treat to this movie is interactions between Sam and Sam. Those shots where they're playing ping pong.
Yeah.
Or he's handing one Sam is handing the other Sam his hat and saying, you put this on, you're burning up.
Right.
Those types of moments are incredible, and the way that they executed each of them, because all of those scenes they had to really carefully plan, and then that Sam Rockwell was able to do them, like largely acting against himself on an earpiece. Like, he could hear what he had said.
Yeah, that's what he had an iPod that the sound guy was recording the take before. He'd put it on the iPod and listen to it, and then do the other Sam's part in that scene, which it's seamless.
Yeah.
Like, especially that ping pong. Like when he gets angry and reaches over the table, and the other Sam like backs off a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like the improvisation, because that was another thing that they improvised a bunch of stuff, let Sam Rockwell do his thing. And so he had to remember exactly, what he was doing, and then, in the next take, riff off of that other thing. Yeah. And so, goodness, that's very intricate stuff.
Yeah. So I love just the skill that this movie had, and that it's an indie film. This isn't
a British film.
This isn't a blockbuster that executed these things. This is an indie film that executed it, and executed it really, really well. So,
side note really quick, do you know who Duncan Jones is?
I feel like maybe he's the son of a prominent rock star.
Yeah, I didn't know this at all until looking into the back stuff of this, that he's David Bowie's son.
Yep.
And I was like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
And then it's so funny because it all starts fitting together. It's like, oh, it's a space in the moon and Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
and it's like,
there's a Starman.
Exactly.
Waiting in the sky.
I was like, oh, this fits pretty well. This makes sense. But of course, anyone can do sci-fi. But the fact that there's that connection, I was like, that is really cool. And then I was like, why is his name Jones? Because I didn't know David Bowie's real last name was Jones. I didn't know that either. And so I was thinking, did he, was it his mother's maiden name? No, it wasn't her maiden name. Why did he go with Jones? Is it like I'm not going to, go off the
nepotism, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. The how famous my father is or something like that. It's like, no, that's actually their surname. And so I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool little connection. One thing that I really like in the movie is the attention to detail. Now, there's obviously a ton of needed attention to detail with the two Sams, him playing both parts, of course. But there's other little, I don't know if I would call them Easter eggs, but little hints and things that are put in place that are just really great that I really like. At the very beginning, when you see Sam, he's got the long hair and beard, and he's running on the treadmill. Did you notice what his T-shirt said?
Wake me up when it's
quitting
time. Yeah.
Which I didn't think of, of course, the first couple times I watched it, but I went back this past week and rewatched it, and I looked at the shirt and I was like, that makes so much sense. Wake me up, wake up another Sam when it's quitting time for this Sam.
You know what's crazy about that? According to the commentary, that is Sam Rockwell's shirt that they had to make copies of for the production. Like, he wore it.
Really?
And yeah, they're
just like, that's perfect.
That's
Wear
perfect. That. Please use that. Yes.
That is awesome. I love that. Okay, another great detail. At some point, let's just call them Sam 1 and Sam 2. That'll make it easy.
But they're not Sam 1 and Sam 2.
I know, there's
Nick.
probably like 5 or 6, something like that. But for the purposes of introducing this movie, there's a first Sam and then a second Sam that comes along. So I'm going to say Sam 1 and Sam 2. So I don't know how long into the movie, there's a scene where Sam 1 is sleeping and his alarm clock goes off, and the song is "I Am the One and Only" by,
which is fantastic.
Chesney Hawkes. I don't even know who that that singer is. I do recognize the song. Maybe it's a one-hit wonder, but yeah, that was another thing on rewatch. I was like, "I'm the one and only."
Yeah,
which is immediately starts making me think, wait a minute, who programmed that song into that alarm clock for this Sam? Was it the company? What's going on there? Is that...
Man, that would be sadistic if somebody in the company is like, hey guys, check this out.
Well, it's planned as subliminal messaging of keeping him in that mindset. And
that's nefarious.
Yeah. It may or may not be that, but it's at least a nice little detail that I like. You know how Sam number 1 does I feel
like we're on a dating show right now. Sam number 1.
Sam number 1, Sam number 2. We're going to ask you questions. Okay, Sam number 1, you know how he draws emojis on the wall to signify his days that he has left? Which is funny because, Gertie is a emoji in a screen. Yeah. But when he has the wreck and he... second Sam gets woken up. Second Sam finds Sam number 1 and brings him back in.
Yeah.
They start having, the crisis of seeing each other. At some point, Sam number 1 freaks out and runs to the bathroom where that wall is, and those emojis have been wiped off, but you can still see the outline of where they were on the stainless steel.
I love that shot. That's so good.
And he starts freaking out and drawing them
back in, basically.
I think it was like his last 2 weeks of drawing them there, almost like an inmate would do tally marks on a wall. But I love that because that Gertie has washed that wall off in preparation for the next Sam. Great attention to detail. It's stuff like that brings something to the next level.
And on an indie film, it's easy for those types of things to get overlooked. And
Absolutely.
So that they focused and made sure to get those things right.
Right. Something that has a small budget, small crew, then people after time can nitpick something to death and be like, yeah, well, see that shouldn't be there, or this would never work because of this, and this. Man, Duncan Jones and the crew on this were super attentive to those things.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to throw out there?
I mean, I love the movie.
It's so good. It's so good. All right. It is good. We love the film, but is it good sci-fi or is it bad sci-fi?
It is good sci-fi. Nick, do you even need to ask this question?
We have to ask the question because this is what this podcast is.
Because we're a sci-fi and fantasy podcast exploring the ideas, mythologies, and truths about iconic works.
Well, then back up your claim. What science or science theory does it put forward that would make it good sci-fi?
I am super impressed because this film is able to introduce several sci-fi concepts, and all of them fit together and feel really natural. And there's no point where you're taken out of the story because you're like, wait a second, that's one too many sci-fi concepts or too many theories.
One's not ham-fisted in there, or it's not, buckling under the weight of everything it's trying to do.
Yeah. So the first one, the film opens with this advertisement, like corporate ad, which I find hilarious because I make corporate videos. Like, that's my life. So I'm like, that little music track and the stock video and all that stuff. I'm like,
happy people and the beautiful land and everything.
And that piece is advertising lunar industries and the work that they're doing mining on the moon. That sci-fi concept is actually realistic. The moon evidently is unshielded in the way that Earth is from cosmic rays and things, and so it actually has absorbed solar radiation that hypothetically could be used towards nuclear fusion at some point. Like, that's real science.
Yeah, I watched an interview with Duncan Jones where he was talking about he previewed this movie, or just showed the movie to NASA. Like, he went to NASA and he was very nervous about it because they obviously know their stuff, they're scientists. And afterward they were talking about, that's so, like, we loved this, we loved this, we loved this. And then he was talking about how, that's what their one of their big objectives is, mining helium-3. I thought,
that sounds fake. It sounds like
it does.
It sounds like unobtainium. It's like one step above
adamantium.
Yeah,
it may as well be what's it Wakanda got?
Vibranium. Yeah, it sounds like vibranium. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just was like, oh, helium-3. But then in this interview, he's like, yeah, where they're trying to figure out the fusion, problem of getting more than what you put the energy out than you put into it, and then if they can break that and start implementing that on the moon, they can start pulling up that helium-3. And I'm like, that's a real thing. That's crazy.
That's good sci-fi.
Well, yeah, good sci-fi. That's in the science past what you even believe.
Asimovian, Jules Vernean sense. There is a foundation of real science.
Yeah. I also, well, before we get to science theory, how about some more science that is there? You just said Asimov. Gertie follows Asimov's 3 laws of robotics
to the letter. Yeah, I love that. I have always felt a little bit in conflict with some of the works that are really dour and down on artificial intelligence, because I've always taken like 2 seconds to think about it and been like, why did we make the murder robots? Like,
stop making murder robots.
Whose idea was that?
Right.
If we're making robots, we're probably making them to serve some kind of purpose, and we're programming them with a function. Now, yeah, I get that if you generate something that is self-learning, it might find an idea and go against the core program, but you put restrictions in place, and Asimov was all about the 3 laws of robotics, that if you make a robot and it follows those rules, it's not going to kill people. It's going to be in service to humanity. And Gertie is that perfectly. Like, I love that by the end of the film, Gertie's actually being really helpful, and you don't see that, especially contrasting Gertie with Hal.
Hal, yes. Well, because he's got the eye aperture like Hal. He has the voice, the kind of deadpan voice that Kevin Spacey does that's very much like Hal. Even the set of the moon base has different like hallways and stuff that look very much like 2001: A Space Odyssey, with the white octagonal hallways and stuff like that, to where it evokes those thoughts of, you immediately think of Hal.
Yeah.
But then he's not. Yeah, he follows through. Now, what are the 3?
The 3 laws of robotics, yeah. The first one is, and this is going to be paraphrased, but a robot can't let a human come to harm, or by not doing anything, allow a person to come to harm. So they have to be helpful. Second law, and this is subservient. The cool thing about Asimov's laws is that each one is sort of subservient to the previous law. So First thing, don't let a human get hurt. Second law, you have to obey orders given by a human, except where it conflicts with the first one. Because if somebody says,
kill me.
Yeah. You don't want your robot doing that if
Right.
human life and preserving human life is the most important thing. And then the third one is that a robot must protect itself unless it's directly in conflict with the first two laws.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not Hal. Gertie does all of that.
Not Hal.
Yeah, not Hal.
Not even a little. Clark has a different perspective of robots than Asimov does.
His is following those laws in the wrong order and not allowing the third one. Hal is very much about the third rule, and it's superseding the first two.
Yeah.
Whereas Gertie doesn't seem to have that problem.
Yeah, well, honestly, we're sidetracking talking about Asimov here a little bit. I feel like this work opens us up to talking about that because Moon's exploration of artificial intelligence, I think, is part of its discussion, too, about humanity. But Asimov writes several stories where let's look at the three laws and how do they relate to each other. Mm-hmm. And so I would highly encourage reading I, Robot. Have you ever...
I've only seen the film. I haven't read it. But that is the
yeah, that's like the moon blowing up in the time machine. It's
not what the book is about.
So, to some degree, it definitely has some, because it introduces the three laws, and there's some things kind of relating to that it does. But yeah, I would highly encourage reading or listening to I, Robot. And then there are also a whole lot of other short stories that Asimov wrote that are about robots. And so I feel like Gertie is in the tradition of the Asimov robot.
Mm-hmm. A couple other things that are good science, space travel and space living. That's something that NASA has been working. I mean, they've done space travel. They've been to the moon. You know, they have the space station where people are living, but the big next step is colonization of the moon or of Mars.
Yeah, probably more likely Mars, actually.
Yeah, more likely Mars. That sending people there for long term and having them set up a base and living. And so this is, it goes right into that as saying, yes, it is, and it doesn't feel far-fetched. It feels very grounded, really, that he's there doing a particular job, and what he's doing, you know, he's got all the automated system. It makes sense that in, like, especially with not just NASA, but individual companies, we're seeing a lot of that more. SpaceX.
That's true.
Elon Musk. We're seeing...
In some regards, I feel like this film was right on the cusp of where... Because privatized science was just coming into its own at that time, where you have the challenge that led to, you know, Virgin launching their independent space vehicle, and then Elon Musk and the efforts that he's put in, and you've got all these independent companies, and this film was really on the edge, I feel like, with a lot of those things.
Yeah, one last thing that I had on here was cloning. That even though human cloning is obviously not, well, we don't think it's happening, but that's something that's, you know, definitely a future-focused thing. But cloning is happening. Like,
absolutely, it's a technology that's been being developed for
right. It's been around for a while. It's getting more and more intricate, and they're having a lot more success with it. So, you know, this is science that's not crazy out there of, oh, there's doppelgangers, this is fantasy. No, I mean, it's a very possible future.
Well, and like a lot of good sci-fi does, it takes a scientific concept and explores sort of the ramifications of it. And so I feel like in that regard, it's definitely being good science. Now, a giant hallway nursery full of matured Sam Bells...
In stasis?
In stasis?
Well, then let's just get into it. What is fantasy about this film?
A giant nursery hallway full of Sams in stasis. Did you ever go back and count how many Sams were on the base?
I like went to like 2 rows or 2 columns worth of it, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do this.
What number what'd you get to?
I didn't get far at all. I was only at like in the 50 range.
Only?
Yeah.
Only?
Once I got there, I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. It's so long.
Well, how do you... I get that...
Like Sam says,
stasis,
why are there so many?
Yeah, stasis... Sure, maybe there's a lot of science fiction that kind of builds itself on that. Planet of the Apes, they get out of stasis.
Right.
That's such a fantasy concept. It's Rip Van Winkle. Like, it's a play on that story of somebody who falls asleep and wakes up 100 years from now and what's going on. So
I would really like to know, why is it always cold? Like, because, the cold is what we put bodies in so they don't decompose. Is that in hard science, that if we were to put somebody in a stasis sleep that it would need to be in a cold storage environment? Because that's in so many sci-fi.
Yeah, evidently, if you cool something down, things like metabolism slow down, and so there have actually been people who have fallen into frozen water or cold, not frozen. You couldn't fall into it, could you? Cold water, and they've managed to survive longer than a person who would have drowned in a similar case in warmer water, and they've been able to bring those people back. The problem, though, if it gets really cold and you start freezing tissue, bad things happen because water crystallizes, and so you basically just serrate everything and break down like muscle tissue. And
right, exactly. That's always been my thought of, I feel like it would be okay at first, but that's not a long term. I feel like that's never been what the solution will be for hibernation or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to, and I feel like I'm struggling to remember this part of the film, but when they pull the clone out, I actually get the impression that he's not frozen in the typical way. Like there's not a big burst of like a cloud of
coming out.
Yeah.
They've got the dry ice back there flowing out.
Yeah, there's somebody with a fan. Yeah, that doesn't happen in this film. So I wonder even what I guess
it did have the like when they open it did have that sound effect.
You know what I think they're using? Whatever the Wicked Witch or Evil Queen from Snow White used on Snow. I think it's that. It's that same poison.
That's what it is.
And so Gertie kisses the clone and it
wakes up.
Yeah.
That's why he has the emoji face, so he has
to, yeah. Because Gertie is Sam Bell's true love. We've just solved it. That's the secret of stasis.
Now the big far-fetched thing that I can't get past is the I can go with the cloning. Okay.
Yeah.
You can clone a body, something like that. And I have this problem with most sci-fi that does this memory cloning and implementation. I feel like that is far-fetched to clone the brain and I think I said this in the last podcast of this is a issue that Westworld has been tackling lately of, can you clone the human brain and it can be real and work, and I just don't that to me is still very fantasy. I don't see that as like hard sci-fi.
Well, and there are ways that genetically you're able to carry on certain types of, but it's more like survival memory.
Right.
We instinctively know a lot of things, but it's to keep us from getting eaten by things in the night, like that sort of thing.
Right. And the fact that these two clones that you see together, you see the differences in them, but they're also, that's a 3-year difference of being isolated alone. They are very much alike. There's so many things. It's the same actor.
You have to assume that Sam number 1 from the film 3 years ago was exactly like Sam number 2.
He even says this so much so that he's like, I see it now. I see what my wife was talking about. How I would fly off the handle at certain things. And so I just don't. That to me is very far-fetched of getting copying somebody over so much that the mannerism's the same, the the way they talk, the way they walk, how they present themselves, not just their memories, but their personality. That is the big one, because, memory is memory. You can copy down video, if you said, intake coming into the brain, you could copy that some way visually and audibly. Those are just memories. That's not who the person is.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and that's a big question. If you clone someone, is it the same person?
Right. And that's a question that this movie tackles as well. But, so memory, cloning, and implementation. Also, this movie has memory connection between the clones. Did you catch that?
Such as?
Such as, okay, at the beginning, Sam, when he's making his coffee or tea there and he burns his hand, he looks over and he has a hallucination of a teen girl.
Yeah.
That's his
daughter.
That's his daughter, who he's never seen
as an adult. So he's psychically connected somehow to.
Yes, and then later, when after that, Sam crashes in the rover. New Sam is awoken. There's the scene where he's sleeping and he's dreaming. I think he's dreaming about his wife. He's laying in bed, and then the camera goes under the sheets, and then you see another Sam with a long beard in a dusty...
The crashed Sam,
Yeah, the crashed Sam reaching out desperately for him. And so that's another... Is there a psychic link between Sam to Sam? Because my thinking is he sees her... he hallucinates his daughter there, although he has no memory of her being that old. And so is the film saying that because of it's been 15 years that something has been passed down from awakened Sam to awakened Sam to awakened Sam?
Yeah, what is the connection between them?
I've wondered what that is.
Definitely feels like pseudoscience.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of thing that you would read about in old pulp magazines, where the publishers got an idea that something was somehow scientific, and it's really not at all. But you can kind of explain it. And the weird thing is, some of those moments are actually really great storytelling. I think that's interesting that Moon dips more towards fantasy in places where it's doing really effective storytelling. The nursery is a great storytelling device. Now, the fact that they're storing thousands of Sam Bells in little boxes, that's where you start like, wait a second.
But it has
having
a huge personal stakes for those too.
Absolutely. The psychic connection is another one of those things where that's really great storytelling, and it's super effective whenever you see the hallucination of the girl that you realize is his daughter. Another fantasy situation for me is the phone call with his daughter, where, I call the moon all the time.
Well, I feel like they've established that they have comms.
Yeah, corporate-owned satellites that are connected to the base. I feel like it's not just like it's not your iPhone.
But at the same time, there was when original Sam was up there, he did call his family. So even if it is a corporate, comm structure, they were at least in the past linked to Sam's home.
I would say if they didn't move, if there were other people living on the moon, like they established that there's more of a presence and that there's a need for communication from Earth to the moon, I could maybe throw that to you. But it seems like there's one man living on the moon, and it's Sam Bell, and he makes a phone call to his home. That, to me, it's a stretch. Now, it's great storytelling. It is such good storytelling.
I feel like if I'm on board for cloning and a guy living on the moon, I'm okay with a call from the moon to Earth. I mean, we have live streams of the International Space Station and
Nick, I'm gonna be honest with you right now.
Those are all fake.
Those are all fake. I can prove it. There are times where I can't get cell signal in this building. Okay,
that's true. It is story convenient that he
Yes.
gets a hold of his child there.
Yeah.
I will say that. But I don't feel
it's
like
great storytelling. That's the thing. I don't want to.
But I don't feel
I'm
like
not
it's
nitpicking.
I don't think it's science far-fetched though.
I think in the world that they build, and that's to me what makes it fantasy, though, is that the world they build that isn't grounded.
Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't that be grounded?
Because he
Because he had
can
to-
call any individual person. This is 15 years after original Sam
But
went
that's what
home.
you're-
So they just left if it's through the company,
Because
it's
they
just,
have
they just
they
left
have
a
the
connection.
signal dampeners, and
They're
they
like,
never
you-
expect him to.
That's convenience. That is
They have
convenient.
these
because
they have these suckers programmed to a T
they get a signal through with the signal jammers.
by going outside of it and then destroying
the
it.
company gets a signal through. So I even wonder about that a little bit. Are those even? I mean, sure, they crash it in at the end. They're saying that those are jamming the signal, but
Oh, they're jamming outgoing. Like the company has complete control,
then
so they can call in
why isn't he getting crank calls from Earth?
because they only allow their feed to go through.
That's what I'm saying.
At
Why
that
would a
time.
call to his? For me, it's far fetched.
We'll argue about this later.
For me, that is a fantastical element that's really great storytelling. Because honestly, that moment in the film is one of my favorites because
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the way that it addresses Sam's loneliness and isolation. And so the storytelling I totally give it a pass. But if I'm thinking hard sci-fi,
If you're getting
that's a
nitpicky
moment.
about it,
That's
yeah.
a moment of bad science in this work of science fiction. But I'm okay with it. Again, it's great storytelling.
Okay. Well, then going into the storytelling, is this work hard science fiction or social science fiction? Is it more Verne or is it more Wells?
Can it be both?
I feel like it straddles the line pretty well.
I agree.
I feel like it has a leg in both areas and it balances it pretty well.
Yeah, I think that this story is actually probably best in the tradition of John W. Campbell, the publisher of the early pulp magazines, who basically took the idea. Okay, so Hugo Gernsback is all about, like, explain to me the science. And Campbell's like, you know what? We could say that there's science going on and we can think through how it works. And maybe that works its way into the story, but it's not the focus of the story in the way that Gernsback was like, please publish for me a page explaining how your technology works. Campbell said, let's treat it like it's mundane. And to me, that's where this work rests. So it's got a lot of science ideas that have clearly been well thought out and are real, but they're mundane so you can actually explore the human story. And so in that way, it gets more into social ideas and maybe comes down more on the Wells side of this, more social than hard sci-fi, really. Like, that's where the value of this work is.
Because we're introduced to an astronaut who's basically like a moon farmer, who all of this technology is at his fingertips. He's used to it. He's up there. He has the harvesters. He has Gertie. It's all very normal life to him. He's very used to it. And so it's just kind of stated, it's here, you see it, but we're talking about this guy, and we're focused on him. I think, it has a really good balance of both science and social commentary. I think one of my favorite things as far as like hard sci-fi, I don't know if you noticed in all the shots on the moon, like when the rover is going, the shadows. Did you notice the shadows?
I did not notice the shadows.
I was looking for this because I had just watched a video debunking the theories that NASA faked the moon landing.
Oh, yeah.
And how, based on looking at the pictures of it and the lighting of it, people are like, oh, this is how they did it. They filmed it in a studio, and they were breaking down the science of it would be impossible to do this. Like, they did not have the technology to fake that kind of sunlight. And one of the things is that the sun is so intense and it's so far away that shadows on the moon are parallel to each other, that they don't ever cross. And so if you had in a studio lighting, shadows would naturally move into each other and all converge. But I loved it because every time I was looking at the rover and you saw, the crater holes and stuff that would cast shadows, and it would drive in between them, two really long, perfectly parallel shadow
that's cool.
lines. And I was like, once again, great attention to detail, because that is the moon. I feel like maybe that argument was brought up about people claiming that, or of course them talking about what does it really look like on the moon. And I was like, that's good, that's really good attention to detail. That is real science. That is how the moon surface actually looks. So I really like that. There's so the moon and space, I feel like, are pretty accurately portrayed. I don't feel like it's...
They try to. There are points where the budget, I found this really interesting, that they were aware of the difference in gravity. Mm-hmm. And so in a lot of the scenes out on the surface, they actually tried to do things with like slowing down things, or you see those perfect parabolas that the harvesters are churning up.
Yeah.
Things are falling differently on the surface. Obviously, though, it was very impractical to do all of Sam's things in the base accurate to, the ping pong game would never work in moon gravity.
Right. So it has an artificial gravity.
Yeah.
That's okay. Plenty of sci-fi has artificial gravity.
And they sort of just they don't even address it as artificial gravity necessarily. It's just like, oh, they're in the base.
Right.
And, yeah.
That is true. It's not even
which is
up.
A lot more in keeping with the sort of social science fiction where there's science, but again, let's focus on the human story.
Exactly. So does this piece accurately reflect reality and the human condition?
I totally think it does. One of the things that really jumps out to me about the work is that it's a story of normies in space. Normal, ordinary people living their lives in space. And this goes back to what I said about Campbell, the idea that super advanced technology should just be treated as mundane. He's not an explorer or a man of action or an adventurer. He's a farmer, basically, a miner who's manning this base and clearly has lived the same day over and over and over again for 3 years, or first Sam.
Right. This 3-year mission is not for exploration and stretching his imagination. This is, I'm here to get paid.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here for work and for a big payout.
And I think that is a setting that allows so many real human themes to be present, because we have all worked dead-end jobs. And we're just waiting to get the paycheck and go home.
Mundane jobs where it's repetitive and you feel stuck.
Yeah. And, some of those things that maybe we believe are mundane, I think it's interesting that if, we look at like a lunar, and it's like, what? He's on the moon? That sounds so cool. To him, it's mundane.
Right. Because he's trained for it. He knows it. He's got that part down, even when, he's up there. I'm sure in the first few months, it was interesting. There was stuff to get out of it. But then after that time, it becomes the normal. It becomes mundane. I'm just up here. Now what do I do?
Yeah, I think another thing in that, so it's a job that he goes away to for 3 years. He's on a contract, pulled away from his family. The story that I'm sure a lot of people who have served in the military can identify with, where they are separated from their family with a distance. And the thing that I think is interesting about sci-fi is that it gives you even a greater distance. If you are in the Navy and you're off in the South Pacific somewhere, hypothetically, you can get back home.
Right.
If you're on the moon, you're not coming home unless someone specifically makes a trip to get you there.
Right. It would take incredible circumstances to bring you back before your scheduled time. Whereas, you've seen, there's plenty of videos online where you can see soldiers coming home and doing, the surprise, and, plans changed and we're able to come back. Same thing with someone who takes a contract job in another state or in another country, for a certain amount of time, and they have to be there until the job is done. and then they have to leave, but they have to leave behind home
Yeah.
and comfort and family. A big thing, a big theme that is obviously in here is isolation.
Yeah.
And what does that do to a person? I mentioned before where Sam is drawing the smiley faces on the wall and how much that reminded me of tally marks of a prisoner, because he is in a prison. It's almost like isolation, maximum to security. There's no getting out, and he's there completely alone. And there's
it's interesting that the company in the story gives Gertie a face.
Yeah.
So that he at least has something to interact with.
Right. So there's eyes. I bet there's so much in here, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into the company with this about isolation. Is we know there's plenty of science out there that isolating a person drives them crazy. It rewires the brain. It is very harmful to someone to be alone for a very long amount of time. They start hallucinating, which we see right at the beginning of the movie. At the beginning he's having these crazy headaches, and there's a physical toll, in which this is one thing that I had a theory on with the company. I have a theory that, and this may be completely off, and and Duncan Jones in a commentary somewhere has said otherwise, but is the 3-year shelf life of a clone due to just how they're genetically engineered? Or is that the longest amount of time that a company can get out of a clone before mental breakdown?
I feel like the film drives at it being physical. Because there's the sequence where like one of them is losing hair and things like that.
Yeah, he's losing hair and he's coughing, and like
losing teeth.
A tooth comes out. But my question is, how much of mental deterioration is causing that? Because going back to the tons of Sam's down in the cradle down there, I would think a company who wants to be the cheapest as possible, they don't want to train more people to go up there. It's much easier just to clone a guy and stick him up there and reuse them and then burn them after they're dead. You would think that they would engineer somebody to go longer, that they would engineer a clone that had a longer stint. And so I wondered if it's not just the wear and tear of the body. Is it the wear and tear of the mind that they have done the studies and the research before doing this program of? Because at the very beginning he's sending a message, and he's like, 3 years is a long, way too long time to be up here. And to me, that's saying this is the max amount of time that a human up here could be alone. And I have a feeling that the company has put in a ton of like research and development into, this is the most that we can get out of one of these suckers before they snap. Yeah. Before it all goes downhill. And I feel like that's a pretty big commentary on like isolation.
Yeah.
And imprisonment. People need human interaction. I like the over and over the computer, because the comms are down, it says searching for long range comms, and it's like, that's the message. That's or at least a message of the movie is this guy who's alone searching for somebody to communicate with. I think he's gotten as much as he can get out of Gertie.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
He's milked that relationship for all it's worth. Because as soon as he meets Sam number 2, the first thing, and he's talking to his plants.
Yeah.
He's, talking to himself. He's doing anything he can to get some interaction out of anything. And then the thing he wants the most from Sam number 2 is to shake his hand.
Can you just shake my hand?
Can you? He's like, I've been up here a long time.
This is going to sound weird, but
can I just shake your hand? And that is so powerful. Right there, a guy who hasn't touched another human in years, that the weirdness of this situation, that it's him, that he's shaking his own hand, he's fine with setting that aside, and the weirdness of he just met his clone. He's fine with setting that aside enough because he wants a human touch. He wants interaction, and that speaks volumes right there. I think
I love the exploration of the conflict that he has that drove the original Sam presumably to take the contract, that he and his wife needed space and he needed to develop as a person. And I think that's actually true in a lot of situations where somebody takes a contract job or has to go overseas or something. It's like, we need the space. And I feel like that really is interesting and real, and speaks to the kind of growth that a lot of us need, and that sometimes, as we see in the 3 years, happens for this character.
You need a retreat. People need retreats. They need sabbaticals. They need times away to get perspective. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. He doesn't realize when he's on Earth how much he loves his wife, and he could have stayed and made it work and got over his brashness and anger problems and all those things. He could work through those, but here's this opportunity, and maybe we should take the time. And she agrees as well. It's you see that in her communications to him, that she thought it was a good idea as well. She, on the other side of that, her needing some time and space as well, but too much. There's a balance.
That's true. Yeah.
There as well of.
I feel like one of the things we can take away in that is that we do need to give people time, and often we're really quick. And I know I'm bad about this with my wife, Mary Catherine. Sometimes there are things where I want you to have arrived now, and I want you to have figured it out, and I want you to have gone through that development now, and I'm impatient because you're not there. And I like that this film. It takes him 3 years to go from the brash man of action who's willing to cut pipe so he can bust out of a lockdown situation to the guy who talks to his plants and is as he refers to himself, I'm a peaceful warrior.
Yeah, he's telling the other Sam to just take a chill pill, go read the dictionary, or just chill
here's
out,
how
man.
Here's how you carve away. You gotta.
Yeah, he's like, you can't hold it like you're stabbing something. You gotta hold it like this and gently carve. Yeah.
And we all do change over time, and that's really, and grow and develop as people. My wife and I have talked several times. I hope the people that we went to college with don't think I'm still the person that I was when we went to college together. And a lot of times that comes up as a result of me being like, that person was terrible in college. I hated them. They're probably still off. I'm like,
right.
No.
But it's been 7 years, and it's like, you change a whole lot in that amount of time. You're a very different person. And that's a big thing, that argument of, do people ever really change, or can a person change? And it's nice because there are, there's different concepts in here, like the company and things that are very negative, and are very talking about, human depravity and the evils that are in humanity. But in this way is a very positive view of humanity, of somebody can step back, review themselves, take some time, make a change, and they can be better. Which, it's really cool because in most films that are going to show that progression have to do time jumps, or they have to do flashbacks to who a person was and what they've come through and now where they're at today. Like, they have to go through a huge journey, or again, they have to flash back to something they were before in order for you to
really
get that
true. This
contrast.
is the one movie where you actually get to see both people side by side.
In real time, you see the difference of a person, which is crazy. That is such a smart way of doing that.
It is.
This is who this person was. This is who they are after they go through this. And then having those two almost like times who you were at this time and who you are at this time interacting with yourself. That's a fantasy of most people, of if I could go back and tell myself, one thing.
That's true.
If I could go back to when I was a kid, or back in college, or back at, these seminal points, and be like, dude, don't focus on this, change what you're doing. Don't be this way, or do that, go down that road. Don't be afraid. Don't let these worries or whatever, cloud your judgment, be oppressive to you. There's things that you'd like to say. And these two characters are there, and one is learning from the other in real time. They're both learning from each other, I think. And that's a really cool way to do it.
Absolutely. The inverse of that, growing, sometimes you do lose touch of things whenever you're older. You aren't as impulsive, and there are certain times where you need to be impulsive. And so younger, brasher Sam does, like you said, have things to teach older Sam too.
Yeah, he's like, he's getting angry because it's cool, because older Sam, he thinks he's 2 weeks away from home. So he's not rocking the boat because he's been alone for 3 years. He's like, they wouldn't do that. That's crazy. You're crazy. I'm going home. He says that, I'm going home. I'm out of here. And then brash Sam, who's just got there, and he's like, I'm not dealing with this junk. Looking at 3 years ahead. I'm not, what have I just stepped into? That's where he's coming from. And he's like, you're an idiot. The company is screwing us over, and you're a clone. I'm a clone, and I'm going to find out where they're keeping all of them. There's a secret room, and I'm going to be the man of action and save us kind of right now. Yeah. So both were very much needed. I also think that the film makes a statement of everyone needs a home.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't looked at that or thought about that.
Of course, there's the isolation. He's away, and you need human interaction, and of course, family. He has that desire to be back with his family, and so often we say our family is our home, and that's very true. Where your heart is where your home is. Your people are your home. But I feel like there's a big message too, of like people need a place as well. They need like a physical place to belong, because the moon is not his place. There's that scene when he calls his daughter, when he calls back home thinking he's going to get his wife back in the year he believes he's in, and he gets his grown-up daughter, like 15 years old, finds out that his wife is gone, finds out that original Sam is there. He no longer has a home. Like, he has no place. It's not even like the idea that his family isn't even really his family. He couldn't go back to them. He literally can't go back to the life that he knew outside of the family. He can't go back there. That's not his real origin. He doesn't have his origin is in a test tube, and that has big psychological issues, or can be really,
it does carry a lot of weight.
It can carry a lot of weight and weigh on somebody not knowing where they're from, and or if they have a place to go. And so much so that right at in that scene, camera goes outside of the rover, and he's crying, and he says, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And then it shows the earth so far away. But he's, again, stuck in a place that he never thought he was going to be forever.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to be his entire life. And he also knows he doesn't have a place to go in the place he wanted to go.
Feels a little like that saying that you can't go home again.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you felt this before. So we're both from, well, I'm from a more rural area.
I am
suburban,
as well. Yeah.
And
small town.
I've gone back as an adult, and it's different.
It's changed. It's completely different.
Life has gone on for people. You have moved on, and your perspective has broadened a little bit. And there are points when some of Sam's even questions of identity, I think, come out of that question of home. If you no longer identify with the people or the place, sometimes you wonder if the values that are kind of baked into you are those still your values?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still belong to that group, that culture?
Mm-hmm. And a tangible, like there's tangible things that humans connect with, that when you go back and you go to the old stomping grounds of, oh, I used to go here with my friends and I used to go there. My hometown, years after, even after I was out of college, a tornado tore through and it uprooted a ton of stuff. And so I went back there like a year after it happened and they had been rebuilding, just going through the town. And it's a one strip town, one road, and you can see everything. And just everything was either just a slab or they had rebuilt in areas and it was something completely new. And it was hard to remember where things were because I didn't have my landmarks, didn't have my bearings. And so then it doesn't feel like what was yours.
Coffee shop that you used to go to is a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a piece of you of you left, a little bit of yourself there that has memory and that has significance, and being able to go there and know it's still there is comforting. And when it's not, that is taken away. And that's what I think he's experiencing.
You also see his desperate attempts to make home where he is.
Yeah. The town he's building out of the cartons, the food cartons. It was, I forget, Rochester, or it was a small town USA place where he and Tess had visited, and he didn't even know that that's what he was building. He was just whittling away. Then Sam number 2 is like, yeah, this is that. He's like, oh yeah. Subconsciously he's building this, and the Sams before him were building it.
They all have been working on it. I think that's pretty cool that they're all building the small town where they're from.
Yeah, which shows that there's something innate. It's not just this version of him. There's something innate inside, a human being that needs a place, that, needs those tangible places to call home.
Yeah. He also has all those personal touches in his little alcove, the pictures and trying to even personalizing the toilet with his smiley faces is another way to try to make an imprint and make that home.
Right, growing his little garden there, putting "Kick Me" on the back of Gertie as just a way, something to have fun. Different ways to make it more homely and normal and not a space station of what it is. So those are some of the human themes that are in there. Let's get down to the core. What do you think this film is the message it's trying to convey?
I have grappled with that a lot because I knew we were going to be having this conversation. We look at the questions beforehand, and I've gone back and forth. There are a lot of things that I'm almost willing to say, oh, that's the point this movie's making, and it's just vague enough that you watch it again and you're like, well, but maybe it's actually saying this. One of the big ones to me is the idea of the rights and value of people, especially if you can make people, you can make these clones. Do they still have human rights? Do they still have value? And does any human have value? And do humans have more value than robots? I love the interaction between Sam and Gertie. That's a little, it's scary when he says, what are you going to do whenever you come back on? And Gertie says, well, the new Sam and I will be able to return to our programming.
We'll be back up and running.
And Sam says, we're people. We're not programmed. And Gertie, I forget the exact word there, but it basically says that, sure, Sam.
Well, I feel like that's one. I wrote down 2 there's one that's kind of outer, and that is what you're saying is the core of what I think the message is. And I think it's an argument. The argument is being played out in the movie of determinism versus free will, in my opinion, is and it's in that statement. The Sam number 2 says, "We're not programmed, we're people. You understand?" To Gertie. And so I feel like the question of in showing both Sams is do the cloned Sams have free will, or would they all make the same choices every time? I feel like that is the question, because I believe that is what the company is operating off of, that they have made these clones and that they have set them on this path, and they will follow this path and they will not break away from it. It's only the error in the genetic code, which was how this whole thing got started, was his mental breakdown to where he made an error that got him that Sam number 1 hit the what's the machine called?
Harvesters.
He hit one of the harvesters, which then set this whole event in motion. That was something outside that brought in Sam number 2, and then the whole thing falls apart. But I believe that the company believes that every Sam that comes out, because we see Gertie doing the exact same thing with the Sam number 2 as he does with Sam number 3 when they awake the third clone. Gertie's in there, says the exact same thing.
Sam, there's been an accident. Or
yes.
Sam, you've been in an accident. You've been in a crash.
And that Sam, both Sam 2 and 3, say the exact same thing back to Gertie.
Oh, really? I
Yes.
did not catch that.
They say the exact same thing. Now, I believe the argument is being made because, once again, there's that final conversation he has with Gertie, Sam number 2, where he says, "We're not programmed, we're people." That is brash, young Sam saying that is what he believes. We have free will. We are people. We're not programmed. Sam number 1, however, before this, says, "I know you can't kill anybody because I can't kill anybody." He says that to Sam number 2 because he's bringing Sam number 3 out.
Yeah.
As
a sacrificial lamb.
As a sacrificial lamb in order to save their skins. And, he's accepted that he's going to die, that this is the end for him. And he's like, "No, we're not going to do that plan." He's like, and he says, "You can't kill anybody anyway because I can't kill. I know because I can't kill anybody." So he's coming from the idea of they are the same.
Wow, I had not. You make a very strong argument for that. I think for me, I still have focused more on the value of people, and even I wonder. And this didn't show up as much as I was expecting in some of the supplementals on the DVD, but I wonder if there wasn't a statement about some of the out of sight, out of mind approaches that we have to the value of especially people elsewhere in the world. As citizens of the U.S., we have everything that we could possibly want, and iPhones and shoes and shirts and basketballs and all of those things, that if you follow back through the company that made them, they're probably making them in some other country where they're paying someone a living that we would not accept, like that doesn't
pennies
afford,
a day.
That doesn't afford them the kind of life that we're enjoying at their expense. There's almost a sort of slavery element to this, and to me, that I wonder if that isn't the core message. But your point about determinism, really, I'm like, oh, that's really it. I'm gonna have to go back and I want to watch it again now just to catch that, because I have not ever caught the fact that the two Sams who are awake and do the same thing. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's the Sam number 2 says the exact same thing as Sam number 3. It's very interesting, and I feel like that goes back into that theme we talked about before of people can change, because it does show the differences between the two Sams, that someone can make a...
But can they now? Now you have me wondering.
See, that's the thing, is you see that he has made a positive change, but do all of the Sams that have been awakened make that positive change over the 3 years of isolation that they spend there and end up being that Sam number 1 that we see? They're all very much like that. Of
Wow.
course, we don't know because we only get small snippets of
Yeah.
them in the computer logs.
Yeah. They at least choose different hairstyles.
They do.
So
Some let it grow
There's a
out,
little-
some keep it tight. Yeah,
you have free will, at least as far as your follicles are concerned.
yeah. Now, what you touched on though is the other theme that I think is very much at the core is the scapegoat. Is the idea of the scapegoat is somebody else's hardship because he's on the moon, he's harvesting all of this energy. We're pretty much told at the beginning that the energy crisis of the world has been averted.
Yeah.
That they figured it out,
This
and that
one
it's a
thing
utopia.
has completely revolutionized and made everything great for everybody.
Right. That it's not a thing. It's not a concern. It's a concern of the past. We're in this bright new future, which brings up, the ideas of a utopia, of a better society.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also is based on these clones being up here and suffering. I found a great, which to me the whole argument is kind of like Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Do the ends justify the means of getting there? There's a great, and I don't know if this is ever referenced by Duncan Jones or anything. I couldn't find anything about this, but there's a great short story by, what is her name? Ursula K. Le Guin. She wrote it in 1973. It is called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. It was a short story published in a science fiction. I don't know if it was a magazine or just a bunch of stories together, but it actually won the Hugo Award for 1973. It's called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. Omelas is this utopian city in the future where everything is pleasant, everyone is fine. It's a blissful community whose citizens don't lack any resources. They're intelligent, sophisticated, cultured, but they don't have any kings or soldiers, priests, slaves, anything like that. It seems like they're technologically advanced, but there's not a lot of futuristic tech or anything in it. It's almost like a fairy tale city. It's a beautiful city. But, of course, with any utopian society in the future, there's a catch. And I want to read, this is a little long, but I want to read this to you because
Cool.
it's beautifully written. She did an incredible job, much better than what I could explain it
story
as.
time for the audience.
Story
of
time.
The Dead Padawan Society.
And I feel like this explains Sam to a T, in my opinion, or at least clone Sam's. So this is Omelas. In a basement under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, secondhand from a cobweb window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner, there's a little room with a couple of mops, with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads near their rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is a mere broom closet, or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but it's actually nearly 10. It's feeble-minded. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, or neglect. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals, and it sits hunched in a corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It's afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes, but it knows the mops are still standing there, and the door is locked. The door is always locked. And nobody ever comes, except that sometimes the child has no understanding of time or interval, but sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close. But they peer in at it with frightened, disgusted eyes. The people at the door never say anything, but the child, who has not always lived in the tool room, can remember sunlight and its mother's voice, sometimes speaks, "I will be good. Please let me out. I will be good." But they never answer. The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, but now it only makes a kind of whining. and it speaks less and less often. It is so thin that there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mass of festered sores, and it sits in its own excrement daily. They all know it's there, all the people of Omelis. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it is there. Some of them understand why, and some do not. But they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest, and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery.
So that's Sam.
And the short story goes on to talk about how some people find out about the child because you grow up in the city and then at some point you find out that what it's built on is this one child.
Yeah.
And some people accept it and some people can't. And those people are the ones who walk away from
the title.
And they walk into these wild lands. No one in the city knows what's out there because everyone who leaves never comes back. And so you choose to walk away from the city and never come back. And I read that and I was like, oh my goodness, that's it.
Yeah, that's Earth and Moon. Absolutely.
Yeah, that there's a person up there who will eternally suffer, even though the clones are separate, they are the same person. And if the company, always got away with it, we would benefit.
Yeah, well, and by the end of the film, once it has been revealed and the world knows, you hear radio pundits talking about, I think he's a lunatic or a liar or an illegal alien.
Yeah,
next.
Exactly.
And they're definitely, even after finding out, I mean, there were people in the company who were complicit in this. I mean, there's a possibility even the original Sam might have been complicit in this.
That same interview that I watched, I thought this was interesting because you and I had a disagreement about this. Brett believes,
in my opinion, based on the impression that I get, the original Sam is honest in this whole thing. He served his 3 years. He was a grunt underling for the company. And so he served his 3 years. He came home. The whole time, the company was collecting his letters and things that were sent to him from tests and pictures and all of those things so that they could set up this elaborate ruse. I think the one place where he does have he's a little culpable, is that in order for the company to do that, either they just completely violated all of his human rights, or whenever he was signing up for this job, there was this big long form like we all see whenever we get a new piece of technology or some new device. We look at, there's this big user agreement, and none of us ever read it, and we just sign at the bottom like, yeah, sure, whatever. And there's a possibility that maybe he is complicit in that he didn't read something that said, you're giving the company the right to use the samples that we collect of your blood and whatever to create clones indefinitely, and that he signed off on that without ever thinking about it. That's how I feel. I don't think he was involved in the way that the company was. I tend to think that he probably, if anything, was involved the way that we all are when we turn a blind eye to these things and don't think about it.
Right. And I can totally see that. That is, I feel, is a good theory. I can feel for that because I just signed up for MoviePass again because I canceled my MoviePass like a couple weeks ago. And then I get into the app because I still have a few days left on it. I'm going to see what there is. And then by clicking OK, when getting into that, you can't go any further. I clicked OK, and it re-signed me up for that daggum service.
Thanks, MoviePass.
I hate. This will probably be super dated someday because this company is.
People will be like, "What was MoviePass?"
Exactly.
Oh,
this
that
thing is
existed for a
crashing
year
and burning right now. But sure enough, I clicked OK, and then I got an email saying, "Oh, you've signed up again." It's
yeah. So that's how I feel. Sam got involved in this whole thing.
That the company was shady.
Well, inevitably, they would collect a bunch of, they would do a lot of tests on him. We need to make sure that you don't have some kind of blood disease and
all the
that's
communications
all they need.
go through them because they're the, backs that are, that it's built on.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. I, however, believe that original Recipe Sam is in on it with the company. That he agreed up front to go up into space, do this 3-year mission, as it were, and they took his DNA with his approval because he knew what they were going to implement up there, and he's living a good life. He's living a good life, getting the payout, and he fully believes that those aren't him, that they aren't humans, that they don't have free will, that they don't have souls.
Oh, and that's so gross.
And so he is diabolical along with the company. And he was in on it the whole time, which to me seems a lot more plausible because, with the interactions with taking everything, with the communications from Tess and everything like that, I would feel like they would need his help and input to make it perfect and believable for the clone Sams. Now, I just can't. Do you want me to reveal which it is?
That's so icky. Oh, did you find out?
I watched an interview that he gave with a reporter. It was like 35, 40 minute long one. And
Duncan Jones?
Duncan Jones, yes. And he revealed which one it is in that interview.
Oh, I hope it's not yours. I
hate to tell you, I told you so.
No!
Original Sam is in on it. Yes.
Oh.
That from the beginning, Duncan Jones totally believed that he was along with them for this, and he is getting handsomely paid.
That breaks my heart. Oh,
for it. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll send you the link to that interview.
I want to keep believing my lie. I want to pretend like there aren't clones mining
all over the world
helium-3,
pretending that it's not a real thing.
And I mean that's true. We definitely have a tendency though to do that.
Well, just like you said before, we know that a lot of companies, these big companies that we have just gotten used to because they're there and they're the providers, that we go with them and we find out these things about their dealings, what they do, and we don't like them. But how often does that spark mass change?
Yeah. Well, and there are justifications made. Like we'll say if they didn't have this, then their life would be even worse. If we weren't, like, we're being charitable by profiting off of their work, or they are. There's third world countries where people are working for pennies, for Apple or some other major company out there, and we're never going to get a sponsorship from Apple now. Thanks,
probably
Nick.
not. But you could make the argument that, well, their country allows companies to come in and do that, or that they wouldn't have. It's so impoverished over there, they wouldn't have anything without this big company. There's ways to justify it, quotation marks, but it's a lot of times it's passing the buck because you feel so small. Like what big change could you make in something that's so massive, and the evils of the world, you can feel very, very small in that. And that's how Sam feels in the situation. Is he's a pawn, especially Sam number 2 is super angry about it. He knows immediately that they're being used as commodities, and immediately is angry.
And I think you have, in addition to people as commodities, I think you also see the just depravity of people. This is a future where people have not evolved to some point where they're above doing awful, terrible things to other people to get a little more money or to get ahead or to benefit somehow. People have a fundamental flaw. Like, there is a fundamental brokenness, and I think that's on display. And even contrasted with Gertie, who really in some ways is the most human in the way that Gertie treats Sam on the station and tries to help. You've got this corporation that's just evil, and it's made up of people. The evil things here are not the technology. A lot of times science fiction will go down that road of like,
these tools are evil.
And this is not that
whose hands
story.
they're in. Yes. Yeah, and it's funny because you believe, because it's very much like Hal, you immediately come in with the ideas of, oh, what's this robot up to? Can we trust him? Because immediately the Sams, you can see that they're a little, they're not very trusting. Sam number 2, especially when when he's not allowed to go out and he has to fake,
or Sam number 1 is just like rude to it,
Yeah, because he's gotten used to him. Sam number 2 immediately doesn't trust him because he does hear him talking to Central down there.
Yeah, but the robot is trustworthy. The people are the ones that are untrustworthy.
They play it really well because they draw on those archetypes in science fiction of the technology being evil, and then show that he's the most caring and most consistent human character in the story, because he's following the rules of the humans on the screen who are telling him what to do, what he's programmed to do. But then he comes in conflict when one of the Sams wants him to do something that goes against what the other humans tell him, and that his hesitancy doesn't come from anything nefarious. It comes from him just trying to work out what is the right.
There are 2 conflicting orders that he's been given.
Right. And it's him deciding what is the greater good.
Which is in some ways, I feel
humans
like
have to do.
Gertie is actually maybe a simpler machine than we might think. Whereas Hal is supposed to be this super advanced system.
Exactly.
Gertie maybe is actually a little more boiled down.
Right. He's not the robot that could take over the world. He probably could never take over the world.
He's Siri.
Exactly, yeah. He's functional just like everything else on the base is practical and functional.
Yeah.
And so that, again, goes back to the company, the people behind it who are trying to make a buck, don't care. They see these clones that are doing the exact things over and over so they can easily justify in their heads that they're not human, that they can say that they're just the product we've made.
I would also say, and so now that you've just completely ruined my vision of a wholesome original Sam who is just duped into giving his DNA up to the company, Sam, each iteration of Sam, except for, of course, newly awakened Sam, who we don't interact with, but each of them also displays depravity too. So they're not free from that either. You've got brash Sam, who is a jerk. You have older Sam, who's given up and is just, you've got all of those different people who are flawed. People are flawed. I feel like that's one of the things that Duncan Jones is saying in this piece, is that people of all stripes have fundamental flaws, and that, yes, we can grow in the same way that old Sam is not the, hot-headed person, angry person that he was whenever he first got to the station. People can grow, but we do have fundamental flaws that we need to overcome. And you need to think about yourself, not just other people in that, because everybody on Earth who is benefiting from this and never asked the question, they're still contributing to that in the same way that we don't ask the question whenever we buy a product from some company and we're just glad that we have whatever it is. If that company's doing something wrong, we're contributing.
Yeah, it's easy to look at the faceless company, which is another nice detail I really like, that there's 2 heads of the company that you see, so there's not just one person to focus your anger on. It's 2, which immediately makes you think it's widespread.
Mm-hmm.
There's more than one person on this. It's a big corporation because there's two heads that are on the screen, and I really like how they are very far away.
Yeah.
They're always very far away in a boardroom, and the boardroom is very dimly lit, and it's pixelated to where you can't make out their faces very well.
Yeah.
And that was a great choice because it's playing on the idea of a faceless corporation, that even the people that you do see, are obscured and you can't see, and they're far away. But then you have to reconcile that again with original Sam, that it might be easy to say, well, that guy's evil. He sold his DNA and they're doing this. But we also know who Sam is because he's up on the base as well. So is it really that he is an evil person, that one on Earth is just a really bad guy? Or did he make a brash choice at a bad time in his life? And that brash choice has a lot of repercussions that he didn't foresee or wasn't willing to see because there was a easy reward right at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, it, in some ways, if I think about it too much, Moon makes me feel gross as a person because I realize, wait a second, this is forcing me, like good sci-fi does, to ask questions about myself and my place in things.
If the film ended with Sam 1 dying and the cleanup crew, who's really there to kill all of them, to come in and they, get Sam number 2, this would be a dour movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would be a really dark ending. It's nice to have the escape for Sam 2 and the repercussions of, you hear that the company stock has like crazy fallen, very much like MoviePass, and
well, or other companies. I mean, Facebook is facing some repercussions because of their use of personal information, or the way that they're willing to kind of play loose with it. And if advertisers want information, sure, collect. And
it's easy now for us
and we're okay with it.
To think about these huge companies of, they could never fail. Facebook, how on earth could they ever collapse? But then how could Blockbuster collapse? How could, any of these companies of the past that were huge staples, like Sears?
Yeah.
Like, all of those are pretty much disappearing. All these companies of the past, I mean, these are tech companies, Facebook and is, so, they have a future if they diversify. But at the same time,
unless they keep making decisions and
unless
they're perceived as wrong or violating.
Unless there's a major shift and a denial of them with a mass culture coming in and being completely opposed to them, could happen. You never know. But all in all, it's for the individual, not just the culture as a whole, but for the individual to deal with and to grapple with and to try to make the right decision on. All right, well, that will end our discussion on Moon. But before we go, I have just a few fun questions to wrap us up, Brett, that I would like you to answer for me.
This doesn't have anything to do with. Are you going to wreck more of my opinions about characters in fiction?
No, this is strictly fun. This is playing off some of the things in Moon that I want to ask.
You're going to tell me that Atticus Finch is actually a racist?
He's a racist. Yes, in this great new book. No. I'm just going to hit you with some hot, fast round questions, and I want to see what your answer is, and maybe it'll say something about your core as a human. Here we go. So, question 1, Gertie or Wally?
Gertie.
Okay. Find out you're a clone or find out you're a robot?
You know what's crazy? I have always there was this period of time where I wondered, what if I am a clone? Like, what if and I've not been told. What if I'm even the subject of it? I'm crazy. I'm
You're
getting
being
locked up
Truman
after this.
Showed right now.
What if I'm being Truman Showed, but in a sense that, like, what if somebody wants to know about nature and nurture in the same way that are the Sam clones going to do the same thing? Are they the same person? What if somebody cloned, like, somebody who is important and then put them in rural Missouri, and they're like, you have no hope of accomplishing anything major. Like, what if I'm a clone of a former U.S. president?
There you go.
And they're like, well, if you don't have a lot of money to start out with, what are you gonna do?
I could see Teddy Roosevelt.
You think I'm a Roosevelt?
You're
Thanks.
a Roosevelt. Yeah, clones. So, clone or robot?
Do I want to be a clone or a robot? Robots don't die necessarily.
Has its benefits. Okay, this is kind of dark. You die after 3 years alone on the moon, or 10 years under Skynet rule.
Skynet rule would be terrible.
But you would be on Earth and with people.
People who are running for their lives from murder machines. I'll take the moon.
Moon alone.
For 3 years.
All right. Sam Rockwell dance or in Moon, or Oscar Isaac dance in Ex Machina.
Oscar Isaac, for sure. I mean, like, again, Sam Rockwell, great dancer, except his dancing in Moon is just like flailing about like wildly.
I still like it.
Oscar Isaac, oh my gosh, the dance that he does there, I don't know that I've ever seen someone as smooth.
Super smooth. Yeah. All right, planetary station or space station. So not
what
Earth.
Planet? Let's talk about what's the
any planet other than Earth. Planetary station or space station.
There's a part of me that wants to say space station, but I know that would get super, super boring really fast. Like, for instance, the sci-fi work that I was looking at this week, I read a short story by Amber Sparks called Janitor in Space. It's another one of those normies in space stories. Mm-hmm. And it sounds terrible. And you're cooped up and trapped. I'm gonna take a base on another planet, hoping that it at least has windows, or maybe that there's air.
Or, yeah, you could go outside even in a suit.
Yeah.
All right. Friendly Kevin Spacey robot or antagonistic Tom Hanks robot?
Wow. That's a weird question, Nick. Friendly Kevin Spacey robot? I guess. I mean, I know there are all the implications right now about Kevin Spacey,
or antagonistic Tom Hanks.
He has. I will take Kevin Spacey's voice over Tom Hanks' voice.
But I'm saying,
and the mood and the tone and everything, like.
Oh, but I'm saying
because Tom Hanks.
No, this is a robot. This is a robot that looks like Kevin Spacey. Is for all intents and purposes.
Oh, see, I was picturing like Gertie.
Not Gertie.
Oh.
Kevin Spacey robot, or a friendly Kevin Spacey robot, or antagonistic Tom Hanks robot.
Dude, I'm sticking with the friendly Kevin Spacey robot.
I took like two men who are around the same age. I think they're close to the same age. One who is universally loved right now, and one who's universally hated.
But give them the opposite.
Roles.
Quality. Yeah. I still think who wants a mean robot? That just sounds terrible.
I didn't say mean. He's antagonistic.
Oh, antagistic. That's the same.
It doesn't have to be mean.
I don't need no attitude from a robot.
It just might be hard to deal with. So, okay. You're on the moon. Okay, just like in the movie. You can take one thing: ping pong table, or set of X-Acto knives.
Ooh, that. I'm a little crafty. I actually, for Trogdor, which we talked about back at the opening of the show, I took the print and play and have made some meeples and things like that. So I feel like you can get more done with an X-Acto knife. We also mentioned the gravity issue with playing ping pong on the moon.
Like, well, let's just say it just like
artificial
in the movie.
Gravity. So exactly like in the movie. I still am going with an X-Acto knife.
X-Acto knife. All right. This is a heavy one. Comms are back online for one call. Do you call for help or call your family?
I mean, can't you call your family for help?
One is going to absolutely get you the help you need right now.
See, the thing is, I think in that situation, I wouldn't know who that person is.
Well, let's say you do. Like, there's the one person that could make it happen. Do you call them, or do you call your family?
I would 100% call that person so that I could afterwards talk to my family when I'm rescued.
There you go. All right, Ziggy Stardust or Moon Age Daydream.
You realize that if I say Ziggy Stardust, I get Moon Age Daydream because
No, I'm talking the song,
it's on
not
the
the
same album.
Song's not the album.
Oh, well, I had Moon Age Daydream.
Moon Age Daydream. Me too. Yeah. All right. Freeze.
I just realized you should have been answering these as we go. Like you've
That I
just
should
been,
have?
yeah. I mean, come on, right?
It's okay.
well.
Just one last one.
Okay.
Freeze dried space rations or organic poop potatoes.
Have you had those freeze-dried ice cream bars?
Yeah, I've had one of those before.
They're amazing.
But that's ice cream. It's like freeze is in the name already with ice cream.
See, I think even
I haven't had
the Martian makes a bad case for potatoes as a diet. So I'm 100% going with space rations.
going with the space rations. All right, those are the questions I had for you.
Wow, thanks for that, Nick.
Some little insight into space Brett there.
Into my psyche and the weird fantasies I have whenever I'm by myself about being a cloned version of Thomas Jefferson or
Well, these are actually I'm the one who's
you're the one and only.
I'm the one who's observing you to make sure that
those are the same answers.
Your answering is the same as this Brett
So
as you did.
Teddy Roosevelt, what was
past three
did he
Bretts.
want potatoes or rations? Which did he go with?
Well, everyone, that is our show for this week. Thank you all for listening, and we are going to be tackling another property next week. Brett, what are we tackling?
We're going to be looking at the Iron Giant.
Iron
So
Giant.
the Iron Giant, Brad Bird film with a giant robot and the worst name ever given to a child,
What's the kid's name?
Hogarth.
Oh, yeah. That is a terrible name.
So we'll be tackling that next week.
Awesome. Yeah, this week was
Or
a bit...
next episode, I guess.
Yeah, this episode was a bit dense, heavy with Moon. We're going to go a bit more lighthearted. I don't know. You tell me. But, yeah, we're going to go animated. It's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
But it's got some good sci-fi and
Dude,
some heavy
it's got
themes
some
in
heavy themes in it.
it. It does.
World peace and nuclear proliferation.
Holocaust and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we will be tackling that next week. If you would like to email us at deadpadawansociety@gmail.com, please send in your comments, your questions, and if you have any suggestions for us for future podcasts.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you. And if you're following this on some other platform, feel free to drop a comment there.
Yeah, follow us on social media, comment on the video, anything that you can to interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. All right, Brett, let's take it out. Thank you guys for listening,
Thank you guys so much. Live long and prosper.
and may the force be with you, always.